One media I love to use with my stencils is embossing paste as well as embossing powder. Today I'm combining both of them with the new Snowflake Stencil from Wow Embossing Powder that was designed by me to create a beautiful winter magical Christmas card. I've also paired it with a beautiful new embossing trio, Winter Dreams, from Wow Embossing Powder. I'm Verity, welcome to my YouTube channel Pretty Little Button, where I make paper crafting tutorials for the everyday crafter. So I have two other cards here that I've already made, and these are the inspiration for the card today. I have done one that is just plain white with a beautiful embossing glitter, and then I've done one where I've added a few colours into the mix to give it a beautiful, soft, delicate Christmas look. I'm using my new Snowflake Stencil, which I designed for Wow Embossing Powder. Ignore the packaging there, I don't have the actual packaging for the snowflake as this was a sample, but just to give you the look of what this stencil looks like. It's a 2-for-1 because it also comes with the mask as well, so you can create with both the stencil or the mask. I will have a video up soon that will show you how to use the stencil as well as the mask, and you can get 3 different cards with one look. So I'm just placing the stencil down to the bottom right corner. It's in a different position to the other 2 cards just to give it a bit of variety. I'm using my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, which I really love now for using with my stencils. It's got the magnetic platform with the magnets to keep your stencil in place so you don't have to worry about it moving about. It's really important when you're using a thick media like this because you don't want your media to cause the stencil to move. For this card I'm using my Altenew embossing paste, but you can use any embossing paste you have to hand. This is opaque white, but you can get translucent, you can get textured ones, whatever you like to use, you can use with this technique. I'm using a spatula to apply the embossing paste through the stencil. Although I've sped this up, I do take my time in real life of applying the embossing paste through the stencil slowly and delicately. If you do it quite fast, it might pull up some of the stencil or it might smudge it underneath the stencil, and you just want to do it gently to ensure that you get a lovely smooth coverage of the embossing paste. It keeps the design of the embossing paste and doesn't smudge through. So with this snowflake, I have got a large circle in the middle that's great for a focal point of where you can put your sentiment, and I'm just completely covering this with the embossing paste and smoothing it out with my palette knife just to get a good coverage. Now I scrape any excess paste back into the tub and then close it because we don't want it to dry out. And it's important that you clean your spatula off as well because you don't want that paste to dry on the spatula. You want to keep it nice and smooth. If you get any paste on your magnets like me, it just easily wipes off with a wet wipe or a baby wipe or a wet cloth. So obviously this is the fun bit with the peel and reveal. I just lift the stencil up quickly, and as you can see we have that beautiful embossed snowflake. Now make sure you do put your stencil into a tub of warm water or clean it off straight away so that paste does not dry on there. Now you can leave it as is, but because the embossing paste is wet, I'm going to add some embossing glitters over the top. So for this card I'm using the new Winter Dreams trio from Wow Embossing Powder. Martina, who's on the Wow Embossing Powder design team, inspired this trio, and it's got a beautiful selection of colours. So this is the Rosy Treaks, which is a beautiful sort of blush pink, and all I'm doing is using a metal spatula to pick up some of the powder and drop it over different areas of the snowflake. Because the embossing paste is still wet, it means that the powder will stick to the paste. Now I don't want to cover the whole snowflake in the colour, you can do if you want to, but I wanted to create a multicoloured snowflake. So once I have tipped the embossing powder onto the snowflake where I want it, I then quickly flip it over to remove the excess. And I do it quickly because I don't want the embossing glitter to fall on the rest of the snowflake. So for the second colour I used Icicle Teal from the trio. And then once I've done that, I'm then going to use the last colour in the trio, Powdered Snow, to completely cover the snowflake because I want this to fill in any of the areas where the other 2 colours aren't on the snowflake. Now, I left this to dry before I heat set the powder. I do this because if you heat set the powder whilst the paste is still wet, it will work. There's nothing wrong with that. But it might bubble your embossing paste, which will give it a great texture if you're wanting added texture. However, I didn't want that bubbling texture in this card, so I left the paste to dry with the embossing glitter on there without it being heat set. Once it was dry, I could then heat set it with my dual speed heat gun. And as you can see, we got this beautiful multicoloured snowflake with a lot of glitter and shine because all those powders from the Winter Dreams trio has glitter in it as well. So to finish this card off, I'm using one of my new sentiment stamp sets with Wow embossing powder. This is the Merry Sentiments, and I'm using the beautiful Merry script along with the smaller Christmas sentiment as well. That's in a more sans serif font. These sentiment stamps have loads of additional smaller sentiments that can pair well with them, and you can either stamp them on the outside or the inside of the card. So I've just positioned the script sentiment onto a scrap of white cardstock, and I'm prepping the cardstock with my anti-static powder. Just because I get my fingerprints everywhere, this helps reduce that residue there, and I'm less likely to get any of my powder sticking to any fingerprints I might have put on the card. So I'm stamping it with my clear ultra slow drying embossing ink, stamping this a couple of times just to make sure I get a good coverage, and then I'm going to cover it with Wow Embossing Powder's metallic gold rich powder in the super fine. I'm using the super fine because I want to make sure it really keeps all that lovely intricacy of the sentiments and detail of that script sentiment. Once I have covered that with embossing powder and funneled all the powder back into the jar, I have a large jar of this because I love this powder so much, and it's great for getting the powder back into it after you've decanted it. I am then going to heat set it with my dual speed heat gun. If you do use Wow embossing powders, make sure you keep them in their own containers that they come in. Wow do a lot to get rid of that static in their pots and powders, and if you decant it into another container, it can increase the static back into the powder. Now, I love a fussy cut sentiment or a sentiment that looks like it's die cut, and I have no problems fussy cutting a sentiment like this out. You don't have to. If you want to, you can add it in as is, but I just use my scissors to easily fussy cut around the sentiment. My tip when I'm fussy cutting is I keep the scissors sort of more vertical and I move my card around the scissors. This allows me to get a really good smooth line as I cut around the sentiment. And it doesn't really take that long because this is quite a reasonably small sentiment. So I added the card panel onto a white card base and I just trimmed it down for a bit of a border and foam mounted it on top. I added the sentiments onto the top of the snowflake with the Merry at an angle, and I positioned it over the circle of that snowflake to draw your eye to the sentiment. And then to finish the card off, I added some white pearl embellishments from Lucy's cards, just scattering these around the snowflake and the sentiment, and it really gives it that beautiful, whimsy winter scene. But it's got a beautiful, elegant touch to it because we've added that soft pink and soft green from the winter trio. Again, remember there's all that glitter in that powder as well, so when you turn it in the light, it really catches the light. I just want to show you, I have 4 sentiment stamp sets with Wow embossing powder that are Christmas related that came out in the July release. I used 3 of the sentiments on these cards today, and then I've also got a Joy and a Peace one. The Joy and Peace one also pairs with my Love sentiment stamp set from the previous release, so if you want to mix up whether it says Joy in the script, Peace in the script or Love, you've got that option. And this is just showing you those 3 cards all side by side. They all look stunning, they've all got beautiful glitter, and they all have a very cohesive look, but are all slightly different in different ways. The one on the left uses Icicle Teal, and then You Made Me Blush, which is from a different trio that is from Pinkalicious Trio, inspired by Joe Herbert from the design team. And then we have got, on this one, just powdered snow over that white embossing paste. And obviously this is the one I made in today's video. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know out of those 3 cards which is your favourite. I don't usually use pink in my cards, but I absolutely love how these turned out, and I was completely inspired by Joe Herbert to use pink in my Christmas cards. You can shop the new release, including this beautiful snowflake and my sentiment stamps, over at the Wow Embossing Powder shop on both the UK and USA site. I've got some links in the description box below. If you're interested in 10% discount to either of those shops, just check out the code that will pop on the end of the video to use at their checkout. If you're new to my channel, why not think about subscribing and hitting that bell icon to be notified when my next video is up. Until next time, happy crafting!